Mark Thomas is a native of Rockford, Illinois, had his early spiritual development through his family who were actively engaged in the United Methodist Church. After completing his Bachelor of Science degree in 1975 at the University of Illinois in Recreation and Parks Administration, Mark held the position of director of SUNY Brockport Fancher Campus, a 500-acre recreation and educational field campus for the college and community. In 1982, Mark and his wife Elaine moved to Chautauqua County, New York. In 1988, Mark and Elaine, along with Dr. Joseph and Patricia Pananko, founded Fellowships of the Spirit and its School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy. Also during that time, Mark started a counseling and training business, which he successfully ran until 1997. In addition to business pursuits from 1992 to 1997, Mark served on the Pomfret Town Council. Following that service, he was elected to two terms in the Chautauqua County Executive from 1998 to 2005. This isn't on his bio, but I just got to tell you, other people have told me when he was executive of the county, he opened up and established many opportunities and many programs for our underprivileged and people who have lesser means. So I just had to add that. He didn't tell me that, but somebody else did. And I think that's pretty awesome. After his elected service, Mark returned to his original career as the Western District Director of New York State Parks. From his office at Niagara Falls, he served as the administrator in charge of 40 state parks, parkways throughout Western New York, and all those employees. I'm sure there were tons. In 2018, Mark retired from full-time government service and currently serves as an adjunct instructor for the University of Illinois Department of Recreation, Sports, and Tourism. Over the years, Mark's advocate desire for spiritual development has brought him to study Vedic, Buddhism, Taoist, and mystical Christian teachings with a variety of teachers and writers from all around the world. He currently serves as an interim foundational pastor of Fellowships of the Spirit Church in Cassadaga, New York. Mark lectures at various spiritual communities and teaches classes in advanced meditation practices at Fellowships of the Spirit School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy and to its graduates. Mark resides in New York's Chautauqua County. I'm so proud to introduce you to Mark Thomas.
Don't need this. So good morning. So nice to see all of you on this weekend where we celebrate labor and the importance of all of our work, no matter what walk of life we've been in, where we have contributed to the goodness of humanity, the goodness of each other, and of course taking care of ourselves and our families, those that we love dearly as well. This is an important weekend. We pause to reflect on labor and its contributions not only to what I just mentioned, but also social welfare, and how with the efforts of especially organized labor, many changes happened over this last couple hundred years in terms of how we look at the workforce, whether it's children, go up higher, whether it's children not being exploited in the workforce. And we still have a major issue with women not being compensated at the level of men are in our workforce. So the work is not done. It is so important that we all continue to work diligently to bring equity in the workforce. I'm here today, though, to talk about a couple other things. And I welcome you to Lily Dale, for those of you who don't live here, but also for those of you who are from the community and say welcome. It's good to see you all as well. The talk today, one of my favorite topics is the topic of grace. And the principles of spiritualism, no matter where you go, talk about that anything that we do in this life, we can make amends for, there is reformation in this life, as most spiritualist principles reflect, or in the hereafter. So we're not condemned to an eternal mess, if you will. No matter what we do with our lives, we always have forgiveness, we always have grace. The fellowship's principle you read earlier, we affirm the law of grace, summed up in the statement, absolutely nothing can separate us from the love of God. Therefore, the doorway to transformation is always open to any soul here or hereafter. Tom Kratzley, one of our local citizens here and dear friend and the director of our School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy at the fellowship, he has a very one-line definition of grace which I thoroughly enjoy, and that is the power of love that renders all mistakes temporary. Grace, the power of love that renders all mistakes temporary. Kind of gets right to the point, doesn't it? Yeah. Tom's pretty good with words, and he's pretty succinct. From that deep affirming principle, it is clear that grace is given from our source, whatever you name the source, whether it's God or the Great Spirit or the One or infinite intelligence, you name whatever you like. The understanding is that the unifying principle of grace underlies all aspects of the universe. It's also clear that by the way we view grace, it's not possible, no matter what we do or do not do, to be outside of a state of grace. It's impossible. And yet so often, we don't act from a state of grace. Since from our source, grace is a constant, I've been asking myself, what is it makes it so difficult for us to accept grace, to live from grace, to act from grace? Not just sometimes, in a few moments, but always. And then when we do have a moment of grace, we are astounded by it. It's like, it's a miracle. Something amazing has happened. And yet it was always there. We took leave of grace. It didn't go anywhere. It walks with us day in and day out of our entire lives. We take ourselves out of that gift and we are walling ourselves out and estranging ourselves from that. And in the process of that, we estrange ourselves from other people at the same time. We are living in a seemingly graceless world right now. In these modern times, we are paying for that with increasingly heavy cost. Let's take a look at some of the forces that are going on around us today in our world that are contributing, I think, to this gracelessness. First of all, it's economics. I remember years ago when I was young, there were these ads for the Smith Barney Investment House, and this British actor would come on and he would say, "We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it." Some of you have heard that one. Oscar Wilde wrote, "A cynic knows the price of everything and the value of nothing." We've got metrics for everything anymore. Everything has to be measured in the business world, in the economic world, and we run around acting as if we're all from Missouri, the show me state. Materialism has now centralized itself in our lives, and it's growing at an accelerated rate. We live in a culture that says you get what you pay for. There's no grace in that. If something is in our culture that is free, it's devalued. If somebody gives you something that doesn't have that you haven't felt like you've earned, the old-fashioned way. You feel like you're obligated, you're obliged. Much obliged? You ever heard that term? Much obliged. No grace in that either. It's not treated the same way as something you pay for. You put money out there economically, you buy something, you purchase a service, you purchase a thing, and we load value into that. Not extrinsically necessarily, but intrinsically we do. And by implication, anything that we don't, we diminish. When we see grace so freely given, we can tend to devalue it by extension. And when we turn grace into a transactional exchange instead of a given, we drop our perception of grace into a reduced materialistic realm. Grace loses its deeper importance, meaning, and most importantly, its power. Second, I want to talk about information technology. Our new God in our culture today. Oh, it's insidious. 24-hour news, weather, opinion, mostly, sports, you name it. If you can't find something to scare you on one channel, you'll find it on another, because if it scares you, they know that, and they keep bringing you back home. Portable phones, TV, you name it, accelerated change. It leaves us spinning, anxious, and numb when we put way too much attention upon it. Let's take a look at advertising for a minute. You know, clinical tests have shown that you are exposed to, if you're doing a lot of things online, you're exposed to 4,000 to 10,000 ads per day across various media platforms, including TV, radio, online, and print. This is a significant increase from the 1970s, when the average person saw 500 to 1,600 pieces of advertising in a day. 500 to 1,600 versus 4,000 to 10,000, depending on how much time you're doing online. If you don't think that's having an impact on you, you got another thing coming. It's insidious. Nicholas Carr was on the platform at Chautauqua this summer. He wrote a book called The Shallows, in which in that book he quotes Marshall McLuhan. Now, Marshall McLuhan was a controversial figure. He wrote a book in 1964 called Understanding Media. And it was prophetic, and it was highly controversial. Some of you might remember him for the line, the medium is the message, to those of you around back then. McLuhan was not just acknowledging and celebrating the transformative power of new technologies, he was sounding a warning about the threat the power poses and risk of being oblivious to that threat. Electronic technology is within the gates, McLuhan wrote, and we are numb, deaf, blind, and mute about it. Now, how's that for prophecy? That was 1964. The effects of technology do not occur at the level of opinions or concepts, McLuhan wrote. Rather, they alter the patterns of perception steadily and without resistance. We are too busy being dazzled and disturbed by the programming to notice what's going on inside ourselves. We come to pretend that technology itself doesn't matter. I'm here to say it does. Then there's politics. Politics is degenerated into us versus them, a polarizing mentality. And never do you hear hardly anymore the message, hey, we're all in this together. Reduced to what's in it for me and the lowest common denominators of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Religion. He's going to go there too? Yeah, he is. Those that know me know I'll walk into these waters. Intermediaries replace direct connection to the source. Got to have an intermediator. In the old days, it was, may the saints preserve us. Atonement theology is scapegoating. Somebody else can absolve you of yourself and your own actions. And then, he's going to do this too. Mediumship at times falls in the trap as well. When mediumship is focused on the medium and not on upliftment, inspiration, bringing a load and a burden release to people, then it's really more about the medium than it is about the message. The net result of all of these kinds of things and many other forces in our world today is pretty big list. And it's pretty heavy duty. And I'm going to walk you through it just for a minute. And then I'm going to get off of this and go somewhere else. A little more enjoyable, maybe a little more uplifting for you today. But we're living in a world of increasing isolation, separation, polarization, hatefulness, nationalism, bigotry, poverty, loneliness, and its cousin disease. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? This is what we're living in, folks. This is the era we are in. And we are not victims of it. We are perpetrators of it. Well, geez, Mark, you got something else to give us today? Or make us smile and laugh a little bit? Uplift us, inspire us? Yeah, I won't leave you hanging out there too long. You'd think I was singing that old hee-haw song this morning. Gloom, despair, agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, agony on me. So how do we work our way back to our roots, back to our source, back to grace, in a world which is pulling us increasingly away from it? Funny you should ask. That turns me to another song from 1971, John Prine. He says, blow up your TV, throw away your papers, move to the country, build you a home, plant a little garden, eat a lot of peaches, try to find Jesus on your own. John Prine, great singer and songwriter. See, grace is costly. One of the theologians that I studied years ago was a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If you don't know who Bonhoeffer was, I'll give you a little background. Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor in Germany in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. He stood up to the Third Reich, to Hitler. He stood up to the Lutheran nationalism of its day that had gotten into bed with Hitler. He stood up to them. He went to prison for it. He was executed within a few weeks of the end of World War II with Germany. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about grace in great detail. And one of the things he called it was costly. And at the time when I was younger, I read about it. I said, that's kind of like a contradiction of terms. How can grace be costly? It's not costly to obtain. It's costly when we don't extend it to each other. When we don't make grace a free extension to everyone and every life in which we touch, every path in which we cross. That's when grace becomes costly. Look at our world today. We're paying a cost. You see, one of the things I've learned spiritually, as we mature spiritually, one of the biggest things we learn is it's not about you. It's about us, collectively. We're all in this together. As we mature spiritually, we learn that responsibility is two words, not one. Responsibility. It's our ability to respond not only to our own needs and those of our beloveds, but those who we don't know well, those who we could care and extend ourselves to, but do not. You see, the more we do extend grace, the lower the cost is to all of us. It's not anything we need to obtain, but what we are called as human beings to do is to extend love to one another in any which way, shape, or form we can. And that's what we're called by our hearts to do. And when we don't listen to our heart and we listen too much to our head and to all those things I mentioned earlier, we're in trouble, folks. We're in deep trouble. And we have an easy way back out of that trouble. It comes from our hearts, not from our heads. You know, the Buddha, another one of my favorite folk from a long, long time ago. The Buddha taught us a lot of good things, but one of the words was Maitreya, which means universal love or universal kindness, and karuna or compassion. And that when we live out that way, we assist each other because we all suffer at some point in our lives from whatever it is that we've got ourselves wrapped up in that's less than joy or less than bliss. We all go through it. We're all going through stuff. Dalai Lama was in Buffalo a few years ago, about a decade ago. And the media was pounding on him. They said, why do you always just keep hounding on compassion? Why do you keep asking about compassion? He said, because do you know of any other need we need to be addressing in our world more than anything else these days? One of my other great teachers of old was Jesus of Nazareth, and he wrote in the 13th chapter of the book of John, I give you a new commandment. I give that to you to love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. See, grace is costly when we don't do that. We are called to extend it. You see, no transaction is needed to experience grace for ourselves, and we don't need anything in return when we extend grace to each other. Just got to show up, and then that magic happens. That reflection is grace. That power, that moment of awareness, of joy, of the gift of love is the greatest gift you give anybody in your life. You know, that is so easy with our beloveds to do. We can extend to the love that people that are like us, that we like, that we are with. But people that are in any way different for us in our culture, in our world, we'll withhold a little bit. We'll hold back, or we hold back a lot, or we create barriers to their full participation in the dream that is what our nation is built upon. You see, grace is a great unifying force, and it is available to every one of us. Grace is a great healing force, available to every one of us. Grace is a transformative force that can make all things new. First thing we have to do is accept that grace is ours and give it away freely. No strings, no attachments. Join me this week in opening closed doors. Find a way to extend yourself in ways, simple ways, easy ways, little ways that will make a difference to somebody else. Show up in a conversation, a phone call, whatever it takes in ways that you might be able to spread love in ways that you were withholding or just were too busy to take care of. Extend yourself. That's how grace grows. In and amongst us. We can do this. We can make a huge difference. You see, one of the other things that I think is so important that we realize is we get so wrapped up in secondary experience, i.e., whatever we read, what we're exposed to electronically, through whatever sources that it comes through, that we get wrapped up in the secondary experience of life. When your spirituality, the things that you can do with one another, that happens in primary experience. That happens in a moment where you show up in somebody's life and you are present and you are giving them your attention. Showing them you honor them. Giving them love. That's the moment. So this week, step outside of that wherever zone you've been hanging, and extend yourself a little bit more places. Just think of even one person. If you did that each week, if we all did that once a week, we would find major change in our communities, in our country, in our world. You know, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, loved his stuff when my kids were young, watching it with them, and I'm enjoying putting the DVDs on and watching it with my granddaughters, and we have conversations after those little Mr. Rogers programs. Fred Rogers, a Presbyterian minister, that was his ministry. Many people don't know that. He never talked about God. He never used that word once in his show. But he exhibited grace abundantly through his behaviors, through what he exposed kids to and their parents. But Fred Rogers had this beautiful saying from the book The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in his office. And I'm going to use this to close my talk today because I think it really kind of encapsulates what I've covered. And now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. What is essential is invisible to the eye. May you all be blessed this day, and may you find ways to spread grace, and let's bring the cost down. Let's bring the negativity down. Let's bring the polarization down. Let's bring all the stuff that can make you anxious down by simply showing up with and for each other. God bless you. Have a lovely morning.